Hello, everyone. Selamat pagi. My name is Yacine Rezgui. I'm a developer advocate at Google. I'm working on Android. I live in London, so it's quite far away from here. But it's first time for me in Indonesia. I'm really happy to be here. You can follow me on Twitter for the ones who are interested to do that. So, I have 67 slides. I will try to fit on the time that's given to me. First thing, so it's a Google I/O extended. For the one who are interested, I gave a talk there on building apps for the next billion users. So specifically targeting the Southeast region of Asia, including also South Asia and Africa. If you want to have a look, just search for build apps for the next billion users on YouTube. You will find me. So, I have a lot of things to say, so I may just go a bit straight, but if you have questions, just feel free to ask me afterwards. Big thing and big news we have on Android is Android Q. I don't have the name yet. For the one who knows Chet has, he didn't give me the name. So please don't ask me, I don't know it too. In Android Q, we focused on three things. First, privacy, and I know many of you complained about it, so we're fixing that. Obviously, performance, we're bringing a lot of good things there to make it faster for all your phones. And lastly, updating in terms of security. I'm going to mention that in the end. So let's go straight to the privacy. We're changing four big things here. Storage, the way we store things on Android, background location access, device ID, and background app launching. I didn't ask that at the beginning, but who is an Android developer here? Can you raise your hand? Higher, higher? Okay, a lot of hands. Web developers? So I was talking to Hamza earlier. I was a web developer until I started this job. So before I had no previous Android experience. I'm really happy to be able to present that now in Indonesia. But you can still ask me web stuff afterwards. So on storage. Currently, this is a permission that is used whenever you need to store things on your external storage. 52% of the apps on the Play Store are using this permission. So 52 apps, whenever you install them, will ask you, can I have access to your files? And it looks a bit scary just for any apps, even a game app, a flashlight application to have access to all your files. We're fixing that. So currently, the way you can do on Android, you have the private app storage where you can just put files, no one will look at them, and it's only specific to your app. And you have this big jungle, which is the common storage, and everyone is having their own folders. Everyone can snoop in their folders, not great. The other big problem is, even though the application are adding files there, you don't know how big is the current application in terms of storage. So whenever you look at the settings, you don't have the reality matching whatever is on the common storage. Also, it means whenever you're deleting an application, you will still have that folder taking up space in your phone. And for you users, it's definitely not great. The other problem with that is because everyone can access the common app storage if they use the read external storage permission, they can check when the files were created and by which app. They can check the user location history. They can just have a look at the pictures and see where are the pictures being taken, which is not great for user privacy. And lastly, if you have private information in those files, other applications may access them and upload them to their own servers. Definitely not great experience. So in Android Q, we're bringing new things. First, we have an isolated sandbox storage. So in that jungle that I was showing earlier, you will have your own folder and no one will touch it. You can add files there without permission, and you can be sure that no one else will access it. And to be able to access to that, you will use the context get external file directory. All of that may sound a bit too detailed, but don't worry, the slides will be provided to the organizer. So if you want to look after it or send it to your team, don't worry, you will have them. Now we're bringing two new collections, the photo, video, and the audio one. So here, similar to all other mobile platforms, any apps can add files. But by default, you can't read the other files created by the other applications. So by default, really good user experience here. You can just add files. We will know which application created them, so we know how big actually they are when we check the settings. When we delete your application, or when the user uninstall it, your files will not be deleted because no one wants to have their photos, videos, or audio to be deleted. And lastly, again, to have access to other files created by other applications, you will use the read external storage. So in this case, by default, by just adding files, you just have a smoother experience. And when you want to access others, you will have the permission dialog being displayed to the user. And to access that, you will use the Media Store API. I think it has been around from P or Nougat. But again, you can just check the documentation on that. Lastly, we have the download collection. So most of you also have a download folder on your phone, but again here is just a big mess. Everyone keep adding files at some point. I think it's the same on your computer. So here, what we're bringing first is by default, you don't need permission to add files, but again, you will need permission to check, not permission, sorry. You will need to use a specific action intent to have access to the other's files. And here it's any file that is not audio, video, or image. So here it's a demo of the Gmail app on Android Q. Rather than accessing all your files, you will have the insert attachment button that will trigger the open file action, open file picker, I think. Yeah, action open document, sorry. And you will have this system UI where the user can select the file and only that file will be shared, not all of them. So again, here, really good for privacy. And for developers, it's just making it much simpler to have access to any file. So just a quick recap here. By default, you don't need to add any files to your isolated Sandbox storage. No one else will access it. Your files are removed automatically when the application is uninstalled. You will use the get external file directory for that. For the photo, video, and audio collections, you only need permission if you want to access all the application files, but your files, you don't need permission for that. Your file stays, again, because the users don't want to have their photos to be deleted, and you will use the Media Store API for that. Lastly, for the download collection, you don't need permission, but you have to use that system UI that has been shown earlier. And you will use the Storage Access Framework API for that. If your app was installed on Android P, you will have automatically the read external storage permission once the user upgrades to Android Q. If you're targeting Android P, you will have the same behavior if they install it for the first time on Android Q. But if you're targeting Android Q and it's installed for the first time on Android Q, you will have that window coming up and you will have to use this new storage model. I know a lot of you don't upgrade and the target SDK and wait the last moment to do that. Please don't do it. So now, background location access. Same thing here. Whenever you wanted to have access to the permission on location, any apps, even like a flashlight app or an alarm app, will have access to all the time your location, which is definitely not great. The other hard part there was if you only wanted the app to use when it's only opened, that wasn't an option. But in Android Q, we're fixing that. We're bringing this new permission where the user will be able to select between the three of the options provided here. The thing to know is, please, in terms of good user experience, if the user don't grant you all the time, don't crash your app, don't make it forced to upgrade and use the thing, because people will just uninstall your app. And if your manager is not convinced, tell him a Googler told him to do that. The other really good thing of that is whenever it's accessed in the background, the user will know it. So you will have an active notification that you can't remove. And that brings a new change here for developers. It means users who are not expecting, okay, Okay, I really have to do that. Hello. Users who are not expecting to have their location being accessed when the app is closed will certainly change the permission outside when your app is not running. So you should always check before accessing the permission, because maybe in between the user changed it. When it's granted, do not expect them to not change it, because now they will see it. You can't hide now. And when they touch that active notification, they can change it really easily in the settings as shown in the second screen. Now, if you want to use background location access, so in case your application is not considered as foreground, so if it has a visible window or if it's a GPS or fitness tracker application, you will need to use the background location access. So far, B400Q, we had these two locations. For the one who didn't play yet with location permissions before, course location will give you city-wide level. So in this case, it will be possibly Jakarta center. And final location will use or GPS, Galileo, or GLONASS chipset to be as precise as possible. So now in B400Q, we're bringing this new permission, access background location. If you don't have it, well, first, it will not work. And second thing, in the future, we're expecting everyone to update their target SDK. So again, do not expect that nothing will change till the end. You will have to request the background access, and you will have the system UI. And again, here, people can still change the permissions. So you should always check, and you should always give freedom to users to be able to consume your app, even though you don't have access to it all the time. So I know some writing apps have different experience based on the permission. If you give it all the time, it will propose you to just access it whenever they want it. If you give it only when you need it, only when the application is open, it means only when you request a cab, you will have access to it, but it will not ping you or will not share your location with friends in case of security, for example. And lastly, if you deny, they will still provide you an input text where you can still write the location of where you are and where you want to go. So you see here, they still have an experience, UI experience, even though the user didn't grant the application. Please follow this kind of best practices. So again, really similar. If you deny you don't have it, allow only while using the app, you will have access to the fine location or course location only. And if you want to have access background location, you need all of that. If your application is installed in P, you will have automatically all the time. But if it's installed for the first time on Q, you will have only what the user will grant you. But again, even though it has been installed on P, the user upgrades the OS, they might still change it, as I mentioned earlier. So you should always check the permission before using it. That's not only for location, that's for camera, for anything, check before sending. That only targets SDK 29, but you can't hide away again from the target SDK. I know it's hard to sell it to your managers or maybe your director because it doesn't add feature directly and everyone wants new features. But privacy is a concern for anyone, as well developers as users, because if everyone abuses the privacy of user will just complain, will put bad ratings, and will just remove your app. So to avoid this kind of behaviors, just respect the user privacy using these new APIs. So now device ID. For the ones who don't know what's device ID, it was a unique ID on Android that anyone could access if they were checking the read phone state. And I wasn't understanding why some games were asking me, I want to access your phone call logs. So basically that was to be able to access this device ID. But for users, first it means, wait, a game that needs to check my phone calls? That's really creepy. So here, in terms of transparency, it wasn't great. So now this permission is only accessed, can only be accessed for applications that are pre-installed on phones and have a privileged status. So I think my guess will be only carriers and OEMs. So it's going to be removed for anyone who is targeting the Play Store. And the serial, which was a really good way to make some specific application, was abused also for this case. We're fixing and changing that. So before, on Android P, you were, whenever you use any of these APIs, you were getting the ID. Now you're getting a null. So just a quick question. Who is using Kotlin at work? OK. Not that much of hands. I'm disappointed. So if you use Java, Java don't have a concept of nullability. So you always have to check. So if you were using Kotlin, you will still be safe because it will crash at some point because this API may return null. While if you use Java, only at runtime, you will find out that on queue, your application is not working anymore. So if you don't use Kotlin, use it. And I'm going to talk about Kotlin afterwards. For serial, it's even more sneaky. Sneaky, I think, it's just better for user privacy. Rather than having null, you will have unknown as a string. So if you check your logs, you just have a string, you're happy, but in real life, you actually have unknown. So you will have a lot of non-unique ID here. So again, don't use serial because I think all the apps here are not using serial for a real purpose anyway, so it was always for the best. So only privileged apps, the one pre-installed, so it means all the developers here who are not OEM or carriers, you should not use it because you will not have access to it anymore. But we're still bringing you alternatives. So first, the Android ID. The Android ID is unique per user and per sign-in key. So if you have multiple apps, but they use the same sign-in key, that Android ID will be unique for all of them. Advertising ID. So another thing to respect, because you know that the Play policies may take down your app if you don't respect our policies. And in this case, if you use an Android ID or any unique ID for advertisement, you may be against our Play policy. So for this case, please use the advertising ID. What's the difference here? It's people can still reset it. So they can go to settings and say, I want to change my advertising ID. And here again, because our focus is privacy, you should just respect what users want. So if they want to reset, you should not try to find another way to get the previous one. And please do not associate it with private information related to the user. It should just be for advertising purposes. Instance ID, for the ones who have been using Firebase and notification, I think you already know it. So this one is unique per installation. So if the user remove your app and add it again, you should use this one specifically for notification or similar purposes. Lastly, Safety Net Api is an API that just here to help you because we know a lot of people were using the device ID specifically to try to find out if it's an emulator, if it's a rooted device, this kind of things. This API will check and will send you back a Boolean to tell you if the device is genuine or not. So if you want to make sure your app is not getting abused by some bad device, this API is made for that. And we have all the best practices there related to user IDs. Now, background app launching. I think I'm still good on timing. So, background app launching, for the ones who don't know, it was in some ways a good use case, but we found out that some application, while you were driving and needed any GPS like Google Maps, thought, I think it's the best moment for me to show them advertisement, because who don't like advertisement while you drive? So here it was a bad usage of the API, and we're removing that. So now whenever you're trying to open an activity and your background process and you don't have the right to open, you will have this toast. So here basically, if your application was doing that, you will be shamed. So be sure that you don't do that anymore. For the ones who still needed to show something really important to the user, you can use a notification high priority. So in case of an alarm a phone call, you should use that, like the phone call or the alarm on Android. And that's independent of any target API. So you can't just hide away behind an old target SDK and steal things that it will go through. You have the right to open if your app has a, you have the right to start an activity if your app has a visible window first. If it has an activity in the foreground task stack, like a GPS app. So in this case, to tell you, hey, be careful, or make sure you take the next exit. Good use case. If you have a visible app binds to the to a service of the app, or visible app sends a pending intent to your app. So that's the only use case where it's allowed. Otherwise, you will get the toast as shown previously. And if you're affected, please check your code base as soon as possible, because Android Q is really coming, I think, by the end of 2019, so it's really not a long time. And we know how sometimes pull requests are getting penned, no one review them, it takes forever to merge them. So make sure that you will update your code base for that. So again, the migration needed for communication application, for calls, for alarms, cross-device authentication, or another part, and I think you should definitely not do that. Whenever some developers, their apps getting crashed, they were just relaunching in the background, please just fix your bug rather than do that, okay? So, more privacy. It's a lot of privacy. On contact provider, you will not have interaction data or social graph anymore. Too many bad usage there. If you're a default SMS application, you can't have access. You can't have access to SMS if you're not the default SMS application. The only allowed use case is if you back up SMS for this specific purpose. Otherwise, we have many other APIs now to have SMS authentication without having to use or abuse the user privacy here. Activity recognition, you don't have it. It's under a runtime permission. It's not open to everyone like before. And USB serial, you only have it if you have access to USB permission. For passive location, if you were having like updates on that, before you were having 6 times per hour, now you will only have it 2 times per hour. So make sure that all your backend and your process are ready for that. Camera characteristics, they were used to fingerprint the user for privacy, for advertisement, which is not great for privacy, and you don't have access to them if you're not using the camera permission anymore. You can't hide your app icon, so some people shared some YouTube videos where you can find a way and hide your app icon. That's getting removed. And now whenever you connect to another Wi-Fi, you will have another random MAC address. Here it's specifically to avoid fingerprinting and try to find out where the user connected each Wi-Fi. Okay, that's a lot of privacy. We have all these checklists that you can check, and I really advise everyone to have a look at that and show to your manager, to your director, to your tech lead, or maybe even your CEO, privacy should be a first priority for your company. Okay. All right, now gestural navigation. So for the ones who are not aware, we have a lot of new phones now. And as new phones, rather than having the big break with a lot of big buttons, we're going now into even the foldable one where the screen is taking all the parts of the phone, where you don't even have place now for buttons. And some OEMs were providing a way to use all the screen. But whenever OEM go their own way, it's not good and just bring more fragmentation to our community. So what we're fixing here is we're bringing that to the system, to the OS. So by default, all your app will take the whole screen, which is great because you can use even more pixels to show more information. And now we have new gestures. So we don't, by default, you will not have the buttons anymore. So if you slide up, you will go back to the home screen. If you slide up and keep it, you will see the recent application. And on the sides, you will be able to go back, any edge. First thing, again, you take all the advantage of the screen size, which is great. Your phone is becoming bigger without having to take more inches. And by default, it means that you have to make sure anything can be done on any edge. For any application using drawer, if you do a slide on the side, you will see a bit of the drawer, and the user have to do one more time to have access to it. I think overall, in terms of having all the screen size and even in foldables, it's hard to just say, please slide on one part to have access to the drawer or have access to the hamburger button. It's really hard. You have to change the way to consume Android application with this new UI system. But for accessibility purpose and just to make it easier for developers, you can still enable as a user this option to have the buttons, and the color will change automatically by the system. So first, you can't hide by putting just black background because we're going to put white colors. And you don't have to take care of that. It just make it easier for you as a developer. But there is some use case where you still need to check the sides to be able, for example, in this case, on the edge, to resize a picture. So you can ask to have 200 density pixel of where you're overriding the system gesture. But you can have access to all the edge and just say, OK, I don't want the user to back or to go back to the home screen. We still have more news. For organizer, I think I'm still on time. So ShareSheet, I know it has been a bit buggy, a bit slow. We're bringing a lot of improvements there. So the machine learning system behind trying to find out which contact you should send, which application should be more interesting related to this use case is getting much faster. You should definitely check out a video shared by my colleague on that. Dark theme, great. Everyone love it. And if you don't love it, you have weird taste. But here, the main thing is first, for night, it will avoid destroying your eyes because we know how bright can be a screen at night. We're fixing that here. So the whole system will be dark theme ready. And something great we're bringing for developers, because maybe sometimes you don't have a designer or you don't have time to bring a designer to fix that, you will have access to automatic dark theme for your application. But we're not expecting you to use that. Please use that as maybe a base and make it more adapted to your own theming related to your brand identity. But we have this dark theme enabled for your apps in case you don't have one. Live caption, so for this one, whenever someone cannot hear because they have a disability or they're in a meeting and they don't want to disturb the others, all the audio stream of your phone will be transcribed in real time on the phone. You can disable that for security or copyright purposes, but by default, your app audio will be streamed automatically, will be transcribed, which is, I think, really great. Again, if you don't have case, you really want to watch a TV news or a sport game, but you can't hear the audio, well, now you can do that. Please don't do that when you're working. I'm not helping you to have a look at your games while you're supposed to work. Wi-Fi network suggestion. So rather than trying to have access to the Wi-Fi setting, we have now a system UI where you can propose a user to connect to a Wi-Fi network, and you can fill the credentials for them automatically. Imagine you're a restaurant chain and you have all restaurants in Jakarta. Rather than telling them, oh, install this app and we will access your settings, they can just propose you, hey, what about you connect to this Wi-Fi, and the credentials will be pre-filled. For companies also for security purposes, rather than sharing the same Wi-Fi password to everyone, they can just use that. Lastly, I was mentioning earlier security updates. Now, rather than waiting the OEMs to provide a new update, some critical security updates are going to be updated through the Play Store. So it's going to be an update like any other apps and just bringing more security for our users. So now I think we're in beta 4 or 5. We're going to have one more, and after that we're going to have the RC. So make sure that you're getting ready because the end of 2018 is coming up really soon. So have a look. OK, another big news. Yeah, that's me in the video. So Android Studio 3.5 will go out, I think, in a week or two. I already made the video. And it brings a lot of really cool features. For the few ones that I remember, apply changes, instant run that actually works, and it's not that buggy, so we're fixing that for you. Windows, huge improvement because we know that not everyone is on Mac or Linux. We're bringing that for users. I know we're bringing also incremental annotation support for Kotlin, because it wasn't the case before. Now we're bringing that for data binding as well for Java and Kotlin overall have that. So rather than having a full rebuild whenever you're changing any annotation, now you can use Kotlin, so you don't have any more reason to not use Kotlin. A lot of good new, really good new features. Just have a look when the video comes out. You can follow me on Twitter. I'm pretty sure I will share it at that time. So yeah, all this news, I will let you check that out after, just to not make sure I'm late for the next talk. Kotlin first. So again, who is not using Kotlin here? So just to know, because I know sometimes it's hard to switch to another language. You're already comfortable with Java, you have many years of Java, what's the point to switch to Kotlin? Kotlin requires you to write much less code. I mean, there is never a case where Java is taking less code than Kotlin. No way. The other part, so less code is always better because it means less bugs, because you have to check less code for that, less lines of code. Second thing, it's more secure. Whenever an app can return something, a method, sorry, can return something can be null, if you don't take care of that null case, Kotlin will not let you compile. So just to make sure that to avoid any crash during runtime, you can have that and it will fix it for you. Overall, we also bring more features in the future specifically for Kotlin. So if you didn't take the time to learn about it, have a look. We have a Udacity free course on it. You can have a look. I actually use it myself to learn Android development. As I said again, before I was a web developer, I had no idea about Android. Thanks to this course, I was able to be a full Android engineer. The other part, we also have full code labs if you have any question for that. So in the future, we may even have some Jetpack libraries focused only on Kotlin. If you're starting a new project, there is no need or no specific case where you should use Java for now. Use Kotlin. It's better in any way. And overall, again, less code is always better for your team. As you know, we're not considered as a good engineer because we write a lot of code. We're considered as good engineer because we're writing good code. Jetpack. I think I have 4 more slides, so organizers, we're good. So Android Jetpack. Everyone love it, but who has been using Android Jetpack so far? Oh, that's scary. Why haven't you been using, so maybe the support libraries? Okay, are we still in touch or we're lost somewhere in communication here? So for the ones who don't know Jetpack, we know there is many versions of Android, and sometimes the features from new versions are not available on previous version. So here, the idea is you will bring a library, you will put it in your code. Like that, you don't have to take care of any issues related to, oh, it's too old Android, I can't support that. Jetpack helps you on that. And whenever we have a new version, you can just update the library rather than waiting the updates to be provided to all the OS versions. So if you don't know about Jetpack, have a look. It's really great. So here we're bringing autofill. For the ones who don't know autofill, it's like if you use 1Password or Dashlane or any password manager. Before we had, I think from Oreo or Pi, we have some OEM API. Now it's a Jetpack library, so better support, and we can still update it. Security, whenever you want to do encryption, rather than bringing your own library maintained by someone who don't have full time, now we have a Jetpack library focused on that. It's going to be maintained by us, and you can use any of the most common algorithms, and you just take 1 or 2 lines of code for that. Camera X, for the ones who don't know camera APIs, Camera 1 was great, but in some ways not compatible with all devices. Camera 2, better, but way low level code, which is much more code for you, much more verbose code. Camera X is bringing the best of both worlds and more compatibility across all OEMs. So have a look on Camera X. If you can check the videos from DroidCon Singapore, my colleagues presented that, so you can definitely check it out. And benchmark, whenever you want to check how fast is your application or how slow, sometimes it was hard to have the same units across all OEMs. So here, in this case, this benchmark library has been used by Jetpack itself, and we're providing that. So all of them, I think they are in alpha, so you should keep having a look. They are still not ready, but definitely get in touch because they're going to be available soon, and they are really great for your development. Lastly, I think this is for me the most exciting things. So as a web developer, I've been doing Angularjs and more recently React.js, big fan of React.js. You have also Vue.js for the one who have been doing similar on other platforms. I think it's on C# you have XAML. Declarative UI overall is really nice way to create development, because rather than looking at styles XML, attributes XML, layouts XML, colors XML, and your Java or Kotlin file, you will have just one single file where you can describe your application. Obviously here the target and the purpose is not to have one huge function of 1,000 lines of codes where you have all your application. It's you will have a small component as possible, really similar to web development. That's why it feels really familiar to me. So here it's really preview, it's not even alpha, we're still working really hard on it. But basically, rather than having all the files I mentioned earlier, you will have your function, this annotation, that's it. And all the components are going to be provided, will be material design ready. So for any animation, for good theming, they will be ready. You can still customize it, but you don't have to design them by default. Composability, you can use it everywhere, will be good when it's out, rather than we push the first version, everyone complains, and we need to wait Jetpack Compose 2. So that's why we're matching it from now on, but it's not ready yet. Just have a look. Don't push that in production, please. Lastly, if you're worried or you have to throw all your code, it's going to be working with all your existing views. So step by step, as soon as getting ready, you will be able to add it in your application without having to ditch all your code. So for big companies where it's like millions of lines of code of UI, you can mix them both, and at some point in the future, you will just use Jetpack Compose. And it's Kotlin only. You can use some mapping and some way to mix that with Java, but by default, it's going to be Kotlin first and Kotlin only. So if you have been using Kotlin, have a look. Thumbs up. Thank you, everyone. I forgot the word, so terima kasih.
Thank you.